welcome to Writing for Congress. We are so thrilled to see you all here today. My name is Haley. I am the Communications Aide and Chief Clerk for the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. Prior to this role, I served as a press intern in 3 different Hill offices. I am joined by Taylor, who is a policy advisor for Demand Progress, an organization that pushes for progressive policy changes and holds the government accountable. We will be giving you an overview of what you can expect when it comes to writing and writing responsibilities as a press or legislative intern. And I will turn it over to Taylor to start off our presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Haley, for the kind words and the warm introduction. So hello, everyone. I guess it's still technically good morning on this Friday. So good morning, everyone. We're going to be walking through the Writing for Congress session today. Like Haley mentioned, my name is Taylor Swift. I'm a policy advisor for Demand Progress. I've been with the organization for almost 3 years now. Prior to that, I worked on the ledge team for the House Democratic Caucus under Chairman Hakeem Jeffries. And then prior to that, I worked for Marcy Kaptur and then interned for Tim Ryan of Ohio. So also was a former intern. So a lot of the things that we're going to be going through, we've had personal experiences on, for better or worse. So hopefully we can give you some of these best practices and you can take them and use them on the Hill or even elsewhere in your career. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to go over is style guides. And sorry, got to have some Taylor Swift puns in there. Got to say, never go out of style. It's going to be really important, now that some of your internships are either starting or you're a prospective intern that is thinking about joining the Hill. Always ask your office if they have a style guide. A lot of offices work differently. Some of them use different verbiage or grammatical structures. Some offices use different punctuation. A lot of them use double spaces in between their sentences, and many offices don't use the Oxford comma. Personally, all 3 offices I worked in, each of the style guides were drastically different, and that actually took me quite a while to get used to. So the sooner you ask those offices about those questions, the better you're going to be shape-wise. And if there isn't a style guide, let's say an office doesn't have a particular style guide or a way that they categorize some of the rules for how they write things, you can offer to make one. And that shows that you're taking initiative and that you want to help create a more cohesive messaging structure or policy structure for your member. It's just a way for you to get noticed from the very beginning of, I've come here to kind of figure out what the parameters are, and if there aren't any, offer to help. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are actually going to be focused around legislative interns, whereas Haley is going to go and talk about the press side, like she mentioned earlier. So some of the items that you might be working on as a ledge intern are going to be quite vast. A lot of them are going to deal with policy or briefs or memos, things that are very topical for issues that are pertaining to what's going on in the Hill at that time. So those include, like it says here, legislative memos, 1-pagers or explainers on particular issue areas or members, remarks, speeches, talking points. So if the member is going to the floor and giving a speech, you could help create one of those 1-minute, 2-minute, 5-minute speeches for them with a colleague, or a vote recommendation. Let's say that there's a vote on the floor coming up in the next couple of days or in the next week. You can work and do research on whether or not the member should be taking a yay or nay vote. And then of course, emails. Everybody here uses emails. We're going to get into that in a couple more minutes, but it's going to be one of the most critical functions of you as an employee and as an intern is having proper email etiquette. And then of course, co-sponsoring and sponsoring bills. Doing research around issue areas that really directly affect your constituents is going to be really important for how to attack and analyze questions and problems around policy. So like I mentioned, we're going to go into email etiquette. It's going to be really important from day one, if you haven't already, to create an email signature. I know it sounds rudimentary, but it's extremely important. It helps people in other offices or even in your own office identify who you are, what your title is, and if you are talking to somebody out in a different office, what office you represent or what office you're in. And then going on that, when you're writing these emails, whether it's to colleagues in your own office or corresponding with colleagues in other offices, the tone of the email and the subject is really going to be important. You want to make sure that you're understood in a positive manner, but you're also taken seriously. Walking that fine line is going to be really important for professionalism and legitimacy, especially since a lot of folks are going to be interning and they're going to be relatively new to this space. So having a proper tone and making sure that your tone is professional is going to be extremely important. And then when you're writing and compiling messages in an email, make sure you fill out everything in the email message before filling out the sending address. I have horror stories, both personally and from people, and I know Haley does too, from people we all know, whether they're colleagues or something like that, of people sending unfinished emails to large listservs or large groups of people, and there would be mistakes, misspellings, the wrong thing sometimes is sent, like the wrong link or the wrong attachment. You want to make sure that you fill out the message and have all of that stuff completed before putting in the send address. That is the last piece of the puzzle that you're going to want to do. Make sure all of those things are checked. And then, of course, this last piece, make sure you double, triple check all attachments and hyperlinks. I mentioned it before, sometimes you can put so much effort into crafting a message that you find extremely important, that your office finds really, really crucial to send, and you sent the wrong materials, right? And so you don't want to be caught doing that. And so making sure you check everything before the email goes out is going to be a huge step as well. So we're going to go over 2 quick examples of proper email etiquette. So I don't know if we want to just kind of brainstorm this together. I'll walk through some of these examples. This is going to be example 1. You see here that in the subject line, all it says is project completed. And then we have, hey, comma, I was able to complete the project today. The file is attached. Reach out if you have any questions. Thanks, Taylor. So there are multiple things wrong with this email. First, let's start with the subject. All it says is project completed. There aren't any specific tasks affiliated with what this project is. It doesn't outline anything. It doesn't, the message is incomplete. If you're sending this to a colleague or your supervisor, or let's say a legislative assistant or your chief of staff, they get dozens, if not hundreds of emails every single day, and they're corresponding with folks inside the office, outside of the office, and external stakeholders off of the hill every day. So if they get an email that says project completed, they're not going to know what that means. And when time is of the essence on Capitol Hill, you want to make sure that your message, your subject line is going to be crystal clear. The same with your introduction. Hey, you need to make sure you're addressing the person that you're sending it to in a professional way. This doesn't accomplish that. And then in the body of the email, we have, I was able to complete the project today. The file is attached. If you look down near the send, the file is actually not attached to this email. This person didn't take the time and the effort to check all of their checklist and go through everything to make sure that that file was attached. And then, of course, it says, I was able to complete the project today. Doesn't give any specifics or any background on what that project was, what the timeline was, and what the expectations were. And then, of course, all it says is thanks. Not necessarily the most professional way to end an email. The same with just the dash Taylor. So a lot of mistakes here. I hope this was helpful. We're going to go on to email 2 to kind of see a better best practice. So here looks much different. Has a proper subject line. We have project complete, U.S. quarterly economic report. It concisely outlines what this project was. And then we have the lead, hi Ann. So in this case, I'm sending it to Ann Meeker. And I said, hope you're doing well today. Just a quick introduction. Attached, you will find a Word doc of the U.S. Quarterly Economic Report project that you assigned to me earlier this week. It gave the timeline, what the project was, and it also says clearly that the file is attached and what kind of file format it is. In this case, it is a Word doc. And if we look lower beneath near the send, we can see that the attachment is actually correctly attached. So check that box there. And then, of course, we have the end, which says please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I'm looking forward to working on more projects like these in the future. Thank you for the opportunity. So of course, if there needs to be additional correspondence on what this project is, having something that says you're comfortable with receiving feedback or questions and saying that you really enjoyed working on this and having that another opportunity shows professionalism and a go-to or a go-getter attitude that you want to continue to work on things like this. So these little details are going to take you to the next level when it comes to professionalism and making sure that everything is done correctly. So with that, I think we're done with the examples, Haley.
So as I mentioned, I'm currently the communications aide for the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I previously served as a press intern in 3 different offices prior to this role, both on the House and Senate sides. So I will be speaking more towards the writing responsibilities for press interns. So as a press intern, these are some very common assignments that you'll be given, though I primarily will be speaking about press releases and social media posts today. But the number one thing to keep in mind for all of these is that as a press intern, you will be responsible for conveying the vision and the values of your member in their voice. And to do that, you need to have a sense of what their policy stances are and what they've said about these topics or policies in the past. So just as Taylor said, your first week of your internship, you should be trying to find that style guide. I would also say try and get a sense of your members' policy stances. And sometimes that's very easy to find. That's on your member's website. And other times it takes a little bit of digging. You might have to ask your supervisor, who typically is a press assistant or the press secretary, but you'd ask your supervisor if there are any internal documents that the office uses that conveys your members' policy stances. And then in terms of looking at what your member has said in the past, you can always use press releases, social media posts, and other types of material like that to determine what they've said in the past. So for press releases, this is a very common assignment given to press interns, where your assignment will be to create a first draft of a press release. So a press release is an announcement. It really can be an announcement about anything, but these are very common topics that are covered. Press releases are typically stored on a member's or office's website. Oftentimes it's emailed out to different offices on the Hill, different reporters, and it can also be highlighted on social media as well. So in your press release, that will consist of your announcement. So what are you actually writing about? A summary of that announcement that conveys the importance of that announcement or the impact on constituents. And then it will include a quote from your member, or if you work for a committee like myself, the chair or ranking member of that committee. And if the announcement involves other members, say the press release is about a bill and you're spotlighting some of the members who co-sponsored the bill, sometimes the release will include quotes from them as well. So for press releases, consider your message. What are you trying to get across? What is the goal of this release? Consider your audience. Are you speaking to constituents, a certain subset of constituents? Consider the tone of the press release, which is typically formal, as well as the tone of your member. And then again, make sure you're staying consistent with previous messaging that your office has put out on this topic. So looking at past press releases and past material on this topic will help you approach this topic in a consistent way. Now, another very common assignment for press interns is to draft social media posts. And I know, I would say most of us on this call have social media, and there is a big difference between creating an Instagram caption for yourself versus creating a caption or a post for a member of Congress. And I remember the first assignment that I got as a press intern in Senator Tim Kaine's office was to draft a social media post. I had no idea where to begin, so hopefully this advice is helpful for you all. But like press releases, social media posts can be on a variety of topics, though these are very common ones that are covered. Again, consider your message. So what is the goal of the social media posts? Are you trying to highlight a bill that your member or your office has introduced or passed? Are you speaking about a current event? Are you celebrating an announcement that impacts your constituents? So determine what the post is trying to say. Then determine your audience. Who are you speaking to? Who do you hope this resonates with? Consider your tone, and then look at previous social media posts as well that your office has put out about this topic to help you determine the approach you should take. And for Twitter, that's very simple. You can use a Twitter advanced search and look at keywords, and that will help you, again, figure out what your office has said in the past so that you can stay consistent. For social media posts, this is kind of a big difference from press releases. You do have character limits for Twitter. So always, before you send a draft to the press assistant or press secretary, put your draft into Twitter to make sure that you have not exceeded the character limit. And then also for Facebook and Instagram, though there isn't a character limit, remember your own experience on social media. When someone has a thesis as a caption, you're more likely to skim or just skip over it. So try and remember to be as concise as possible. And then lastly, consider if visual elements will help enrich your post. So when I say visual elements, sometimes a photo or a graphic that goes along with the post can highlight what you're talking about. And so determine if that's necessary. And if you do think it would benefit the post, figure out if you're responsible for finding that photo or creating that graphic, or speak with your supervisor to see if that's something that they will help out with. And then a word of advice, embrace feedback you receive. As a press intern, a lot of your work is public facing. Many people in your office will be seeing your work. So just know that the constructive criticism you receive will help you grow and learn in the long run. So like Taylor, I also have a few examples of work that you will put out. In this situation, this is a press release. There are 3 kind of mistakes or areas of improvement here with regards to substance, consistency, and grammar. So I'm going to give you a minute to read over this release. And then for those of you who have access to the chat feature, let me know what you think could have been improved or what the mistakes are. If you don't have access to the chat feature, just think in your head, what would you have done to make this press release a bit better? So this press release highlights 3 bills that the House Committee on Veterans Affairs brought to the floor and then later passed in the full House. I'm seeing some responses come in, which is great. Thank you to everyone who's participating. So as I mentioned, these are highlighting bills that were passed through the House. And Chelsea and Juan, you're definitely right. This press release is missing some sort of sentence that highlights the importance of these bills and kind of just a summary of what they do, because they're listed here. We say they're bipartisan bills, but we really don't say anything specifically about what they do and why people should care. So that definitely could have been added here to improve the relevance of this release. And then we also, with regards to consistency, as you see here on this list of bills, after each bill, we have the member who sponsored the bill. We have that for the Senate bill 3414, and then the Senate bill 3084, but we do not have that listed for the House bill. So that's definitely something you want to keep in mind, be consistent. In this case, it was Representative Elaine Loria who sponsored this bill, so we would put her name here in parentheses. And then lastly, a really small note, but important note, is that the format for these bills is slightly incorrect. So for HR, we have the 2 periods listed here, and those periods should also follow the S here to represent the Senate bills. So again, this is an example of a press release that you might draft as an intern. And again, just keep in mind the message that you're trying to put across, make sure you're summarizing the topic or the bills, as well as the importance and the impact on constituents. And then always double and triple check your work for any typos or grammar mistakes. And then our last example here is a tweet. So there are 2 kind of mistakes or areas for improvements here. And so I'll give you a moment to read over this and let me know in the chat what you think could have been improved, what the mistakes are, or again, if you don't have the chat feature, just think about it to see what could have been fixed. Yeah, so I'm seeing some responses come in, which definitely correct in terms of whenever we mention a member in a tweet, we want to tag them and then also make sure we're tagging their official government account as opposed to their personal account. And so instead of having David Trones, we would put @Rep David Trone. Or if it was a senator who had sponsored this bill, typically their official account is Sen, S-E-N, first name, last name, or Sen, last name. Another thing to keep in mind is acronyms and shorthand. It can be really tempting to use those, especially for tweets. In my case, for my office, we use acronyms for bills. That's fine to use. But for regular words like veterans, we typically spell those out. So just something to keep in mind. And again, make sure you're adhering to your style guide to help you determine the best way of conveying this information. So now we're going to be discussing some of the practice assignments we put together. As Taylor discusses this, I'm going to pull this up and share my screen so you can see a few examples.
Each of us provide 4 example assignments that you all can use either now, or let's say you're preparing to apply for an internship and you need writing samples or examples of things that you want to use. These prompts are going to be perfect for those, whether it's going to be press related or ledge prompts related as well. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the legislative prompts, and then I'll let Haley go over some of the press prompts, and we can kind of have a Q&A as well. So I'll just go over one example. So let's go over the legislative memo. So choose any current event, national or district specific, that impacts your member in some way. Craft a 2 to 4 page memo that outlines the context of the issue, presents various recommendations or proposals on how to improve or solve the issue, and provides action item that your member or senator can take to address the issue. Now, there's going to be extremely important pieces to remember that both Haley and I mentioned in our presentations, and that's going to be how these issues or how these policies directly affect constituents. At the end of the day, the member works for the constituents and the voters. And so how an issue of lead in the water or lack of education funding or environmental protection, all of these things, how that directly can affect your district or your state is going to be extremely important to not only outline the context of the issue or area, but then also, there's going to be various recommendations or proposals that you're going to want to put into a memo like this. Having those direct through lines and recommendations to how it affects people in the district is going to be extremely important. 2 to 4 pages is usually kind of the length for these kind of proposals, but if it's anything shorter than that, you can look at prompt number 7 as a 1-pager, kind of something that is more immediate, more digestible, more concise, so that if it's needed right away or needed within the same day or day or two, that can be used in the same way. So I'll let Haley go and talk about the press prompts as well, and then we can open it up for Q&A.
Yes, so as Taylor did for his legislative prompts, these are a list of press prompts that you will definitely be asked to write at some point as a press intern. So these practice assignments really give you a sense of what you can expect as an intern on the Hill. And we're also hopeful that not only will these help you refine and hone your skills, but you can also use them even as writing samples as you apply to internships and jobs. So here are a few kind of prompts that you can work on. But we hope you use these moving forward, going on from Internapalooza to really refine your writing skills. So we will open it up to questions that folks have, either about the presentation, anything we discussed, our experiences as interns, or any questions that you have about interning on the Hill.
Haley, I'll just ask you a question. So let's say I'm a press intern and I get an intern project from my supervisor. What would be the first step to starting that project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, firstly, read and reread what you've been assigned. There have been so many times when I've given an intern an assignment and they complete it, but they maybe didn't read my instructions fully, or they skipped over a section. So make sure you read and reread what you've been assigned so you understand the full extent of what you've been assigned to do. And then from there, as I mentioned before, make sure you know what your member has said about the policy that you are going to write about. So gather that information, see what the member has said in the past, and then using style guide, using previous examples, you can start to put together what you've been assigned. So Taylor, I know you were talking a lot about kind of writing responsibilities for legislative interns. What are some resources that interns can turn to help them, improve their writing skills or help them work on different projects they've been assigned?
Yes, so I would say first and foremost, you mentioned it during your presentation, understanding the tone and the prose that the office uses in press releases, in tweets and social media pieces, and if you can get your hands on them, previous memos or briefings, understanding how to write those in a similar way is going to be extremely important. But when it comes to researching legislation, understanding what bills are going to be on the floor, you're really going to want to turn to congress.gov and the Congressional Research Service, or CRS. Those two pieces are going to be foundational for any research project, because congress.gov kind of gives a real-time update of kind of what bills are being introduced every single day, what bills have been introduced in previous Congresses, so that you can get a better understanding on if an issue you're working on has been introduced and where it stands. And then if you need to have additional research or insights, the Congressional Research Service has objective analyses or briefings, backgrounds, overviews on any issue you can think of, and they're updated all of the time. So I really encourage everybody using congress.gov and CRS.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just speaking of additional resources, for current interns on the Hill, whoever here is watching this, who is interning in an office right now, you do have access to a free LinkedIn Learning account as well. And you can always access trainings on Congressional Staff Academy. And so those also have trainings that are helpful in terms of improving your communication and writing skills as well. But just wrapping up here, if anyone has any questions, leave it for us in the chat. But Taylor, I guess what would you like to leave folks off with? What's kind of one piece of advice you'd give for folks here who are interning on the Hill or would like to intern on the Hill when it comes to making the most out of their internship?
Yeah, great question. So enjoy it, I think, is the most important thing, right? This is an opportunity that could lead to a further career or something else. But I think it's really important for you to take every single day and use it as a learning experience, whether it's constructive feedback from a colleague or new opportunities to do press briefings or tweets or research assignments or legislative proposals. All of those things are going to be tools in your toolkit to make you a better professional staffer, whether it is in Congress or out in the private sector or in the public sector elsewhere. These opportunities are going to be extremely informative, and soaking up all of that information is going to be great. So how about you? What advice would you give, Haley?
I'd really just echo everything you said. I mean, interning on the Hill is a very unique experience. So really try and soak up as much as you can, read as much as you can, like read as many of the bills and reports that you can get your hands on, and try and meet and network with as many people as you can, just to get a better sense of what they do on the Hill, what motivates them, and what they've loved about their jobs. But thank you to everyone who joined us. We were really excited to have you on. Next up, we'll be navigating constituent interactions with Dr. Brian Baird. Join to hear some tips on how to stay cool, calm, and collected in any situation you might face in Congress. So we hope to see you there, and thank you to everyone who joined us.